Okay, I will now call. Oh, okay, I will now pause to. Okay, thank you. I will now pause to let the clerk flip over the right pages in her binder. And I will now call the meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order and request the clerk to call the roll.
Ms. Ammons?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan?
Here.
Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts? Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here.
And I will now ask if there are any suggested additions to the agenda. Okay. If not, I'll ask if there are any staff reports at this time. No staff report is additions to the agenda and staff report.
Yes, I do have one staff report. I wanted to let council know, the committee know, that last week we, IDOT did conduct a road safety assessment of the University Avenue corridor between Lincoln Avenue and Five Points, Cunningham Vine Street area. They were here all day Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. They gave staff and other folks kind of a verbal assessment of the corridor. It's my understanding that they'll have a written report 4 or 5 months from now, unfortunately, but that's just the time frame it takes before we would receive it or be available to the public. But verbally, they talked about a variety of short-term, mid-term, long-term suggestions as to how we could make this corridor safer for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles. So I was encouraged by it. It was a very interesting, about a 10-member multidiscipline team that kind of look at the corridor with different sets of eyes in their evaluations. So I wanted to let you know, because several months ago we had talked about this and it was coming and it came. So that's what I wanted to report. And when we get more of the details, we can get into the specifics of the recommendations with that report.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Gray this time? Okay. Thank you, Bill. I will certainly personally look forward to that because of my concerns about the Lincoln and University intersection. So I'll be really interested to see what they say about that. Okay, it's now time to consider the minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have a motion for approval? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so that motion is up for discussion. Are there any corrections to be offered to the motion to approval of the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll request all who approve the minutes to say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, ayes have it. Now we are to public input. So let's see, I have a card from Bishop King James and Reverend Evelyn Underwood. And I believe that this is just to, not to speak at this time, but to express, and it says, for the record, we are still concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems, and oh yes, and we don't wish to speak at this time. Okay, thank you for your input. And now have, golly, my eyes are failing me. Oh wait, this is Bishop. Oh, we have two cards from Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Underwood, but I think it's the same message. Okay, and finally, Mr. Carlos Donaldson, who wishes to speak on Broadway.
Carlos Donaldson, 406 Brookings Drive, Urbana. I know it's not often that you receive good words coming from me, especially criticism all the time, but I would like to commend the council and also the commission on the bite of the recent decision that was made on Broadway. That was a good deal. I think that you work with the people that live there and those that was concerned. And many times, as elected officials, we don't always do things that affect us in the way that we vote a certain way. But I'm one that would always think that we would look at the residents on that street and kind of go along with them because they're there every day. And I think that was a good decision, and I hope that in the future that we would not take any more parking away from the residents that have with bike paths. I think there's other alternatives to be taken. A suggestion would be to use a sign on those streets and let the people still park there, but I think there's a bike that is bike friendly and the cars and the bike use the same portion of the street. Of course, we've done that for years and years and years, and I know we've had more bikes now, people are riding bikes more, but I think that still the bikes and the cars can use the same street. Will save the city money, wouldn't have to stripe as often. One or two signs on the streets that this is a bike friendly, and then I think that there's a bike indication that on the street, and it would not cost as much money, and I would hope that in the future that we would listen to the residents, those taxpayers. I'm not saying that bikers don't pay taxes, but then when a person moves on the street, they move there for certain reasons. They look at the area, they look at what's going to happen to that street, and once you take parking away from them, it's critical.
Okay,
So
any,
I would hope
Thank-
that I hope that we look at that more in the future when we're taking parking away from those that live.
thank you.
Broadway was a good decision.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Donaldson?
Mr. Donaldson, yeah. So
Yeah,
one,
Mr. Smythe, yeah.
one of the issues with Broadway was that it's a low average daily traffic street, so that's compatible with bicycles. But one of the issues that has been raised nationally is the speed limits in our communities. Just as with pedestrians, when you get hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, your chances of survival are 9 out of 10. If you get hit by a car at 40 miles an hour, your chances are 1 out of 10. You're basically flipped. So basically there's an exponential increase in the likelihood of death based on speed. Would you support residential streets being at 25 miles an hour instead of 30? Okay, thank you. That would make streets all streets friendlier for bicycles.
By all means, I mean, because the lower the speed, the safer it is for everyone, bikers, pedestrians.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other simple or strategically constructed questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Donaldson. That was a really interesting discussion because, from my perspective, we had people whom I deeply respected on both sides of that. So I thank you for agreeing with how we saw that through. So we now move. All the other public input is at the time of the item. So we now move to consideration of ordinance number 2014-10-099. And do we have a staff introduction to that issue? Oh, I should state for the record, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 2, Section 2-160.
Okay, thank you. This ordinance in the staff report speaks to a slight revision to the Code of Ordinances. Chapter 2 talks about how street vacations occur and kind of a defined method for notifying the public when we would literally close a street, stop the flow of traffic on a street, vacate a street for whatever the purpose might be. And it's a fairly involved process. But from time to time, we have what I would call partial street vacations, or portions of a street that may be vacated that don't impact the travelways of the street for peds, bicyclists, and motorists, vehicles. And so I provided an exhibit that were three fairly recent such partial vacations. And in working with the legal division, we came up with some suggested language in an ordinance that would provide for not going through such public hearing notification type processes, but merely to inform the council that we've had a request come in, or some development occurred, or whatever the matter may be. There's a reason for a partial street vacation, and we would not go through this public hearing process. So in your packet, there's some suggested language that staff had put together. And this is, I would call this in an effort to kind of streamline and be sensitive to staff time and whatever, because it is a big amount of time for not only public works, but community development and legal to go through the public hearing process. So if you have any other questions, let me know, but I tried to give you some examples attached. Maybe real quick, I'll explain what happened in those situations. The Park Street, Maple Street was the 5 Points East development, and it worked out well. That a little sliver of land on the Park Street, Maple Street right-of-way would help make that particular development be more, it would be helpful in that development, which now has been developed, and it's, I'll call it a strip commercial retail shopping area. Secondly, is an example on Sycamore Street by Park Street, and there was what was called excess right-of-way. Didn't really need it. The street is a local street serving various homes and part of the Armory, and the adjacent property owner had requested, and we complied with a vacation of a little triangle piece of property, which was deemed excess right-of-way. For the other exhibit, it is on Guardian Drive, up by the Guardian West Bumper plant in town, north of University Avenue, and unbeknownst at the original time of siting and building a bumper plant, a need for a dust reduction type equipment to be installed at the east end of their site. And lo and behold, it was too close or interfered with the existing public right-of-way. So we ended up taking a symmetrically shaped cul-de-sac street and offset it, so to speak, or vacated a sliver of land, and then they dedicated land to make up for that lost space. So those are examples we're talking about. We're not talking about full street closures now, where you would go through the public hearing process.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Mr. Smythe?
Yeah, quick question, Bill. So if I understand this, then you'd bypass all the petition and communication stuff, and you'd come directly to committee with saying, we're going to vacate this piece of property. So that's
Correct.
what you mean by certified to council. Gotcha.
And we're not materially impacting
Right.
travelway.
Yeah. So we basically take care of the minutia paperwork that isn't needed to come directly to council. We have a public discussion, and boom, it's a small matter, and we deal with it. Great. Okay, I like that idea.
Okay. Any, yes, Diane?
I understand the rationale, and I'm fine with this. My only question is there any notification of the public, or is it so small that you don't think it's necessary?
Well, usually, yes, to answer your question, is notification of the public immediately impacted by the action. But what usually happens in these cases is that the public contacts us. You know, that's usually what happened. In all three of these examples, the surrounding property owners contacted us.
Okay.
But yes, to answer your question, if they didn't contact us or the impacted parties adjacent to the action, we would definitely want to contact them, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Ms. Emmons?
He just answered my
Oh, okay. Mr. Smith?
Move to send to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay, and I don't believe this requires a roll call. So is there any further discussion? Okay, would all in favor please signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the next item is ordinance number 2014-10-094, an ordinance vacating a right-of-way, Smith Lane, south of Lantern Hill Drive. And this again comes from Public Works. Mr. Gray.
Okay, technically unrelated, but this is Smith Lane, which is a grass strip of land. It's not a road, not an active street or sidewalk, but we were approached by the adjacent property owners either side of this strip, and the map shows its location. It's Smith Lane is what it's called, and it's south of Lantern Hill Drive, and it's just west of Smith Road in east part of Urbana. It's a 13.5-foot wide by 120-foot long stretch of land. Both properties either side are residential in nature. One is an actually it's a townhouse or a duplex type situation in a house on the west side. The city has no interest in this becoming a street or even an alley, but we would need to keep easements for the existing utilities in this area intact. So the ordinance reflects that there would be an easement over this lane, and both property owners are asking us to vacate it, and staff does not see a reason not to vacate it.
Any, yes, Ms. Ammons.
Just in this, because it's not a street or anything, it's a grassy area. Why are we using this to vacate a grassy area? I don't understand that.
Well, it's public right away.
So it belongs to the city.
I'm sorry, yes. This
All
is
right.
public right away. It belongs
Okay.
to the city. The city, and we went through all the departments and talked to utility companies. There was no comments back that we should keep it for some reason. We don't foresee an alley being built here or any, public bike path or what have you, and it's not even continuous north and south either. It's just a remnant, if you will, from a subdivision that occurred many years ago. Perhaps there was thought that this would be the new Smith Road, but as it turned out, it was further to the east. So it's public property. We'd like to shut it and have it become back on the tax rolls.
So then it would go to the property owners just.
Correct, half and half,
Just south of
yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Madigan.
So, Bill, then immediately to the south, so the same strip of property adjacent to 2312 Rainbow View, is that also city property?
Private.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. That's my only question.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Is there a motion to proceed with the issue?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and I believe we can do this by a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. The next item is resolution number 2014-09-047R, a resolution approving an agreement for engineering services with Hanson Professional Services Incorporated with regard to the North Lincoln Avenue improvements. Note that this is not a new item. It was sent from committee, forwarded to committee, from committee to us from 9/22. And again, Mr. Gray.
Thank you. In your packet, we duplicated the same materials that we provided on September 22nd, so apologize for the paper. But the significant item is, since the September 22nd meeting, staff has had a variety of discussions with the county engineer, the consultant, and IDOT officials, and we have come to a good understanding that we can look at 6-foot shoulders on the north and southbound lanes here, that this would not, in our mind, be a huge change from what was originally suggested, with the southbound lanes having the curb and gutter, which would be the ultimate recommended city build-out. We don't know for how many years a two-lane roadway would remain two-lane versus four-lane. It's hard to predict the amount of development that would trigger 4 lanes. Usually you need to have at least 12 to, well, let's just say over 12,000 cars per day or more before you really see congestion needing 4 lanes. Again, it's hard to predict when that would be. The shoulders will provide bicycling protection, if you will, in both directions. The IDOT recommended widths based on the volume of traffic and the speed of traffic is a 6-foot shoulder. In speaking with the consultants, this would not add additional costs to the project. In fact, it might possibly reduce a little bit the cost of the project. What I can't tell you at this time is what will IDOT need to see in revising the project design at this juncture. The Paris local IDOT District 5 staff don't believe it would be a significant change. What I included in the packet was actually a short memo to IDOT to explain what we would like to do. It will be an determined amount of time when Springfield will respond back to the district office and respond to us. I just don't have that answer tonight. I was hoping maybe I would, but I will certainly keep council informed with that answer. So I think the worst case would be there may be additional consulting fees to do some other modifications. We don't think it means more public meetings and that sort of thing, but we haven't heard from Springfield.
Okay. Mayor Pressing.
Yeah, I just want to thank Charlie for bringing it up, pointing out that the bicycles need to be able to go north and south. And I really want to thank Bill Gray for just tackling this thing. It was pretty far along, but still, I think we're going to end up with a much better project. So I thank you both.
Okay. Mr. Smythe.
I just want to thank Bill for going to bat with it, thinking about it, and seeing if he can make it happen. So I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And the bicycling community echoes that.
Mr. Madigan.
So, not being an avid bicyclist, I'm trying to understand what is the capability of bicyclists immediately south of this project at the current time?
Yeah, well, we don't have full shoulders south of here, so.
It's not even a paved road, really.
Well, no, there is.
There's
It's
a lot of
paved
oil
road.
and chip in that area too, isn't there?
No, actually, Saline Court, which is where it currently dead ends, is an improved roadway, okay? Now, some of the shoulders are actually gravel in that stretch, and then when you go south of the Saline, it's a widened highway, curb and gutter with storm sewers, okay?
Okay.
But I believe, I think there's a sidewalk, if I remember right, by the super value, but it stops like at Wilbur Road or what have you. So it's not a continuous sidewalk up through here. And just to remind everybody, when we had the meetings, public meetings, various discussions with county officials and city staff, and it became evident early on that part of the Olympian Drive project needed a Lincoln Avenue component because it was a key access point for trucks, et cetera, to get at least to the north and to the west and to 57 and to Champaign, that the county was willing to partner with us, but it was a road project. I hate to use the word bare bone, but it wasn't to include sidewalks and streetlights and other things. It was just to be the roadway. So that was our focus at the time. We weren't necessarily thinking of other facilities, but just a 2-lane roadway improved to take out the right angle 90-degree kinks in the existing Lincoln Avenue. That couldn't stay put. They would not accommodate trucks.
Right. So, I know this road's going to be available to all traffic, but
Yes.
this is basically an industrial area.
Correct.
So, is it, and you guys please educate me, is it common to have bike paths in basically industrial stretches?
Well, I think the answer is yes. There's no reason why we can't. This is an identified route in our bike master plan. This does connect up to Olympian Drive, which has shoulders also, so we have that east-west connectivity. And then once you get beyond the corporate or city limits, if you will, and you're in the country, I mean, riding on the chip and seal roads is common. I mean, all over Champaign County. So this will just help get folks driving, out of town, up there, and then and beyond. So.
Mhm. And so, I mean, what is your best estimate of the additional expense, and also any kind of concrete idea on the delay?
Well, the additional expense is no additional expense, okay, is what we understand in speaking with the consultant. Okay, so it's still a $3.6 million total project cost. I can't answer the delay part tonight. But actually every week that goes on, it just pushes the project design from starting and then the bidding for the project, because ideally we would like the construction of Lincoln to coincide with the completion of Olympian. And it could be very close to about the same, but this isn't helping us.
But I thought you had mentioned earlier that there might be additional consulting fees. I mean, how do you redesign this at this point
Okay.
without additional expense?
Okay, the design consulting fees aren't changing. That's what's before you tonight. But what may result in additional fees, and I hate to say that without knowing the details from IDOT, is we may have to go back to what I call the preliminary engineering phase, because this is a design change. That might be a modest amount of a few thousand, $5,000. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to. That's the range of possible more fees.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I think the design is better with the shoulders. I mean, having one curb on one side and one shoulder on the other side for who knows how many years until 13,000 vehicles start using that. Seems a little, I mean, it'd look a little weird and obviously wouldn't function as well with the bicycles, I think. I did think of my third question I was going to ask 3 weeks ago that I forgot. So I wanted to ask that one. This is a pretty wide right-of-way. It's like 150 feet, is that right? Or 100?
More like 100.
100 feet. And 20, 30 some feet's going to be reused for road, and most of it's not in Urbana. Who's going to be responsible for mowing the grass and plowing the roads and things like that?
Well, again, the intergovernmental agreement, once the road is completed, it will be Urbana's responsibility. The county will not have responsibility for maintaining the road, plowing it, striping it, all those sorts of things. As far as mowing it, usually the ditch mowing would be a city responsibility. Sometimes you have property owners that take on that responsibility too, depending on the situation. In this case, it may be that we have to mow it a few times a year type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was it. Thanks.
Charlie, could you take the
Sure.
chair for just a moment so I can ask a question? What is it? Can the shoulder with no additional expense be kept in a more natural state than a mown state?
Yeah, actually, tonight I can't tell you what that slope mix will be, but usually we try to come up with a turf, if you will, or a slope mix that doesn't require a lot of maintenance or mowing.
So just let me put in a word for the monarch butterflies.
Okay,
We need
butterflies.
more milkweed. We need more
Okay.
milkweed.
I'll inquire about that.
Okay, and yeah, I'll take the chair back. Okay. Okay. So, any further questions or comments on this item? Mr. Smythe.
I move to send this to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay. Any further?